I agree. I hate that streaming is deleting old shows and things like that.
I want my HBO smut. I want that back. I want my 90s channel surfing back. Somebody talked me into getting this channel, Night Flight Plus. Night Flight Plus looks like somebody went to the local video store that was going out of business and took all the VHSs nobody wanted, and I love it.
Well, we may as well discuss this frankly, now that you know the facts.
Welcome to Midnight Local. I am Meredith, and across from me in virtual space is Greg.
Hi, I'm Greg. You might know me from such internet shows as How to Drink.
Exactly. And today we are talking about 1932's The Island of Lost Souls, 70-minute film.
Perfect length.
Yeah. Oh, God. I'm like, why 90 or more for features? Why wasn't it just like, you cross the hour mark?
Dude,
great.
You just immediately touched on one of my favorite things about pre-code films. Can we do like air horns, like pre-code film?
Yeah.
Yeah, like anytime we do pre-codes on the movie.
Yeah, this one's pre-code.
See show notes for details.
Yes,
right. I'm not going to break it down
We're
again.
not breaking it down again. But if you watch the Freaks episode where we do talk about it more, we have star Leah Hames coming back in this movie.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah, the girlfriend, girlfriend is not Cleopatra, the nice girl. I forget her name. Yeah.
She's great.
Yeah, so
I like her in both movies.
Is Freaks 31 or 32? It was
Off
32,
the top of
I
my
think.
head, I'm not going to be able to tell you. But
I
yeah,
think
probably
these are
32.
the same year. So yeah, she was having a big year for transgressive
time.
cinema.
Yeah, for sure. I've seen this movie many times. It is my favorite pre-code horror.
It is,
But you fell asleep.
Well, no, I want to be very clear that we had a very difficult week that involved flat tires and driving back and forth to the city and a dog with a tick bite and all sorts of things going wrong. So I was unusually exhausted. It is rare for me to fall asleep while watching something, but it did happen to me on this one.
That's fair. I mean, you did see every frame. You went back and filled in the blanks.
Yes, I fell asleep like right as he was getting to the island. So I was like fighting to not fall asleep, and then I started to see as he gets pushed onto the boat, he gets pushed onto the smaller boat, all of these characters, and was like, oh, I need to pay attention. So I stopped the movie and decided to restart it another time. Man, we could walk through this one real quickly, but go ahead.
Because it's only 70 minutes. It's brilliant.
Yeah.
Well, okay, you want to walk through it. First off, it's an adaptation of The Island of Dr. Moreau.
H.G.
Our main
Wells,
character opens the movie. What's his name, the main guy? It doesn't matter because he's kind of just an everyman. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
yes, we were talking about Edwin Parker.
Edwin. Yeah. He is fished out of the ocean, having gone down, sunk on a boat, which is crazy to me because you're starting right from a place of intrigue and interest and like, oh my God, he's overboard, and they send a wireless, to his fiance in some island that they were bound for, that he'll be on his way. He's not dead.
Yes.
Instead, in defense of a member of the crew, he assaults the drunken captain, who throws him overboard in a way that would have resulted in his death, by the way.
Yeah. I heard a lot of talking too about how successful this, because he falls a long way.
Oh my God. Yeah, like 20 feet.
Yeah, at least.
onto his head.
Right. And it doesn't look like it immediately made me think of the fall from the tower in Frankenstein and how bad that dummy is when it falls and hits the windmill.
It looks for real the way this was done.
And this one looks great. It looks like a stunt double. I guess people have sort of gone frame by frame, and it is a dummy because you see like an arm moving away where an arm would be broken had it been a human. But it was a great edit. They did a really good job with that stunt.
Classic Texas switch. Yeah, he throws him overboard because he's angry. And the captain is also just like a great drunken Bluto type, fuck you kind of guy. He's like a real piece of shit. And the doctor is getting off here. This is an island that's on no charts. The doctor on board, who used to be a doctor, I was a doctor once, is getting off here with him. And I think it's Apia, they call the island or whatever. Maybe Apia is where he's bound. It was
an actual place. I read an explanation of it somewhere and was like, it's a place. It doesn't need explanation.
Right. And they're in the South Seas, which is the Pacific. And he gets left there, and Moreau doesn't like, and actually they pronounce it Moreau in this movie, which I think is funny. Doesn't like having guests, but then he's pretty happy about it. And we immediately see that the people who live here, other than Moreau and the doctor who is his friend, Montgomery, are pretty strange. They just, I mean, he calls them interesting looking natives you have here. Yeah. But anybody who's watching a horror movie knows those are some kind of monsters.
Yeah. They seem sweet though. Like they don't seem
threatening.
They're kind of the help. They've made them the help.
Well, there's like a couple of them though. When you're walking up to the house, they're like lurking in the caves and the shadows, and he's got his whip and he's like, "Get back!"
But on the boat, on both boats, there's one on the bigger boat.
Ling.
Yeah, and then you kind of pan across all of them when you get to the shuttle boat. And it was Freaks. After watching Freaks and knowing this came out in the same year, that was immediately the mindset I was in.
Well, Ling is a recurring, he's a minor character in it. He is Moreau and Montgomery's sort of like manservant.
Yeah, and he's slapping him around a bit, which makes me sympathetic to him.
Who's slapping him around? Oh, yeah. You're supposed to be sympathetic to Ling, for sure. Anyway, gets to the house. Things are not right. We get it. Moreau has some crazy new experiment he wants to do now that this guy's here. To the extent that to keep him here, he sinks his own schooner, which crazy.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, what crazy. There are so many ways you could have prevented that thing from being able to sail.
Well, and Moreau is played by Charles Laughton, who brings a sort of British effeminate. Is he British? Or am I just making him British in my head?
No, he's British and I believe also gay. And
yes,
yeah, and I think that was like I think that playing gay coded characters was kind of a feature of his career.
Yes.
He's a queen,
and
he's kind of a bitch,
right? Which makes him seem almost unthreatening in next to this young strapping lad, but because of that, he's terrifying. He's throwing his whip around.
Oh,
and,
yeah. Oh my God. And I have so much I want to talk about this character. He is to me maybe the most effective villain in all of the pre-code horror movies. None of them really send a shiver, but he is chilling.
Yeah.
So long story short, as you may or may not know, the people on Moreau's island are animals that Moreau has modified into humanoid shapes for science.
He's just been experimenting on them. Yeah.
Yeah. And his goal is to see if his finest creation, and I forget her name, but she's credited as the Panther Woman, is woman enough to find a man attractive. Have I put enough human woman in her that when I present her with this hot young boy, she's going to turn her affections towards him? So he's trying to get him to have sex with the Panther Woman, basically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. That is the plot of the movie, pretty much.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why he traps him there and he won't let him go. And he doesn't realize he's trapped there right away, but he does quickly. I think he pretty quickly finds out about the experiments and is absolutely horrified. But, also is trapped there, so isn't trying to make deadly enemies right off the bat.
He sees a guy strapped down to a table is the first real moment.
You're vivisecting a man.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Lautner says something like, "Please spare me your youthful ire," or something like that.
Oh my God, it's so good. It's so good. Vivisecting a man, and that's when he explains what he has done. He looks at the plants that are all crazy huge. He's like, "Yeah, it was my first breakthrough. I was changing plants, and now I'm changing people, and they made me leave London for it. But someday I'll return triumphant."
Him and Montgomery have both been run out of London for experimenting on animals and people.
I think that Montgomery's reasons are different. I think Montgomery threw in, not with Moreau, not because he was his assistant in London, but I think that Montgomery had other, quote, professional indiscretions, he said, that caused him to lose his license to practice and perhaps put him in with, bad form with the law. Because Moreau threatens him with that. He's like, maybe I could send you back to London and you could rot in a prison.
Right. Wasn't the idea that he was a drunk? Was he drinking? So maybe he performed surgery drunk and killed someone, something that was.
It was either that. I read it as either that or some kind of age of consent issue.
Oh, okay.
One of the two. Or
did we have those? At that point?
Absolutely. No, we did. Yeah,
that were enforced.
Did. I mean, in cases, it depends. I mean, so here's the thing, right? Just to talk about this, right? The FBI is the law now that can prosecute criminals who cross state lines, right? That's basically what they are. It's the federal police who can operate federally. And that was a pretty novel idea because prior to that, unless you were rich enough to hire private detective agencies like the Pinkertons, you had no access to that kind of justice. You couldn't there was no law that could reach somebody if they crossed state lines, except for like, U.S. Marshals and stuff like that, which are pretty limited in capacity. And so in the same sense, there, like, as true as it ever was, it was more true then in ye old times that the poor had no recourse with the law. Basically, they had no justice. In the same case, like, if it was an age of consent issue, he was probably fucking like a judge's or important person's daughter. Certainly not just somebody. Although I could be wrong. I don't know.
That's where your brain's been though when you've watched this movie.
In the same way that who's the Philadelphia science boy man? Founding father?
Benjamin
Franklin.
Okay.
In the same way that he was run out of France,
Got it, okay.
For age of consent issues. Meanwhile, I think this is maybe the only misstep in the movie, but I'm fine with it. We have this long scene. I know what they're going for, of her looking at like the missing board for ships because she thinks that her fiance is dead. He's
well,
drowned.
this happens before she gets the telegram, or the
That's
wireless.
the point. She immediately gets back to the hotel and finds out he's alive because she gets the telegram. It would be a great way to start. Like, it's almost like they had two openings for the movie and they decided to leave both in. The first frame of the movie could have been her looking at the missing ship's board and getting the telegram, and then we cut to the ship. Or it could have been him being rescued and sending the telegram, because they're both high action, high stakes scenes.
Yeah.
He is being rescued from the sea. Her fiance is dead. No, he's alive.
Well, I kind of
instead they put both in and they rob the energy from the second one. To me, it's the only misstep in the movie. Sorry.
I mean, we are talking about early filmmaking, and I think they pull back on her after she turns away from the board. It's so they highlight the name, which was so cheesy to me, but whatever, it's fine. And then they have this long shot where they pull back from her, and a part of me has to wonder, like, were they just really proud they pulled off that shot and it had to make it into the movie?
There are some
spent a lot of money on it.
Cinematographic feats in those old days. Well, it's also only 70 minutes long, so it might have been like, this movie's too short.
Yeah, right.
We can't cut that out.
Yeah.
You're going to have to help me out here, because as many times I've watched it, I'm not good at order of events. At some point, he tries to leave in the night because of drumming, and then he meets the residents of the island, and he sees the giver of the laws respond.
Well, so that's after. So his boat gets sunk. We go back to Apia. The captain of the original ship, they've landed in Apia, and she's like, I got a wireless from your boat that you picked up.
Yep.
My fiance, and he is like, oh, I dropped him off at the first port I went to. She then goes to the authorities. The authorities suss out that he was being an asshole and he didn't actually follow maritime law and take him to his first port. He just dumped him on this island that doesn't have a port, doesn't count as a first port of call.
He was saying, hey, man, it's a port of call, and legally he was like, that's no port I've ever heard of.
Yeah, exactly.
So, no.
Sort of threatens him. And
I want to point out, too, this is a great pre-code woman character, because she is a prime mover of the plot here.
Oh, she's sussing everything out. Yeah.
She's not there. In 1935, she would need a man to help her with this. She would have to find
go to
a man.
The authorities.
Exactly. Right. Exactly.
Goes over this captain's head, gets him in trouble.
Exactly.
She's believed over him.
She has to go to the boyfriend before we can advance the plot, right? Anyway, sorry.
Yeah, no, I hear you. That makes sense. Yeah, she has agency. She is going to handle the situation.
And she's tough, and she's getting it, and she's threatening, man.
Well,
and furthermore, she's getting his shit done.
Yeah, she finds someone to go get him, and she goes with him. I think in 1935, her role in the movie is over, and the captain goes to the island on his own, possibly.
Potentially, it could go either way.
Yeah.
She would have gone, and she would have been a damsel in distress, and she probably would have. The captain would have had feelings toward her, and then her fiance would have rescued her from some disaster, and all would have been right. She would have been back onto him.
Right.
That's probably how you deal with that in 1936 or 5 or 8, whatever.
Right.
Just my guess.
So they get to the island. We know he's been threatened. Things are going poorly, but at this point is where all hell sort of breaks loose. They try and leave right away, but it's the middle of the night, and they have to walk like an hour and a half or 5 hours, some amount of time through the jungle.
Yeah.
And Moreau's very manipulative. sort of suggests, sorry, we just did an episode of The Fly, and now I have a fly in here. It's driving me crazy.
Oh, try not to merge with it.
I'm going to try.
Don't use your computer.
I have no pods in here, so I think I'm safe. Moreau implies in front of the captain and Edwin's girlfriend, Leah Hames, Ruth is her name in the movie, that he had been attacked in the woods. He knows it's dangerous. So how rude of it would be of him if he forces them into this dangerous situation. And what is he supposed to explain at this point? Like, this man is torturing people on this island. Like, he's kind of stuck in an unbelievable situation, and I think finds it less dangerous at that point to try and like make it through the night to the morning. And of course, Moreau has no intention of ever letting them make it to the morning.
There is, I mean, we did skip a beat because he did, and I forget what the context was. I think it's after the vivisection that he tries to leave. He tries to just go back out into the jungle, and alone before the fiance Ruth and the other captain arrive. And that's when he is kind of set upon by the villagers. And then Moreau comes out on this hill with his gong and his whip. And that great scene. What is the law? Oh my God, it's so good. It happens again, but the first time it happens, Edwin is alone.
What happens in the night is that Lugosi's character,
the giver of the law,
sayer of the law, breaks into her room and she starts screaming. So they run in and then they decide to leave and not stay the night.
Oh, is that Lugosi's character? I thought that was a different one.
Oh, was it? Lugosi's character is the sayer of the law. Okay, maybe that was a different one that comes through her window.
I forget he's very gorilla-like. Lugosi's character is very werewolfy-like.
Okay.
I think it was like there's a brute character who shows up like numerous times, kind of as like a menacing guy. I think it was him. So,
one more thing we skipped over is I know we talked about Lotta, the Panther Woman, but until Ruth comes back, we do spend a lot of time with Edwin and Lotta.
Oh, he makes out with her.
Yeah, they build a relationship. There is something between them for sure. She's not just like a throwaway character. She is a huge character in the movie.
Huge character.
And have you ever read trivia about how she was cast?
Yes, it was like a nationwide beauty pageant thing.
What a risk to take, too. Yeah, they wanted an unknown, so they did a nationwide contest, which I guess had 60,000 women participate.
Hi, I'm a cat lady. Can I be the cat lady in your movie?
Yeah, there was very specific. They had to be between a certain age and a certain height range.
Yep.
And this is the person that they found.
She did more work as the Panther Woman, too.
Yeah.
Like, she shows up in other films credited that way after this.
I guess an actress who was really pushing her way into this role really wanted to be cast in it. Ended up being thankful that she wasn't, because Kathleen Burke, who's the name of the woman who does play Lotta, was really pigeonholed into this role and was never really able to break into anything else, which also makes sense.
Literally credited as the Panther Woman after this.
She had no fame or anything else. Like, she was an unknown, so there really wasn't anything else for her to lean into.
I'm going to give a breakdown here one more time because I feel like we got it a little twisted. He sees the vivisection. He tries to leave. He encounters, there's this shot of them all running out of the darkness at him, straight into the camera, eye-locking the camera. He's about to be attacked. Lawton, Dr. Moreau, shows up and makes them give the law, which reminds them, what are the 3 laws? Not to walk on all fours, not to eat meat, not to kill.
To draw blood.
Not to spill blood.
Spill blood, yeah.
Those are the laws. And then, my God, his is the House of Pain. Oh, my God, I love that. And so the House of Pain is where he does his vivisection. Oh, jump around if you got the feeling, jump across the ceiling, where they get their name from. But jump up and get down. Yeah, you have this blank look on your face, like, please get on my wavelength.
I'm trying to let you finish the walkthrough.
Okay. Then we get the captain and the fiance arrive, and also his relationship with Lotta blooms while he's there after the giver of the law scene. They arrive. He's like, oh, good, we can get out of here. Then Lawton points out, like, you can't leave in the middle of the night. You know how dangerous it is out there. And what he's really implying is your fiance is going to get raped. And that's when he says, okay, we got an even better plan now. We don't even need him. I'll just make it so that her room isn't locked and my rapist gets in there with her.
Tells him to go rape her. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
The captain guy decides after that interaction, we're getting the fuck out of here. I'm going to get my crew, and he doesn't make it. He dies. Lawton tells the brute guy, kill that captain. And this causes the island to descend into chaos because now the villagers realize that he has broke his law. He is the creator of the law. The law has no weight, and it's anarchy. It's chaos, and they can do whatever they want. And of course, since he has the House of Pain, they strap him up in the House of Pain and vivisect him to death. And the shrieking as this movie gets out. Oh my God. It's so good.
It's so good, yeah.
Only the poor captain who was hired dies, I guess.
Yes, I think so.
I thought Montgomery dies.
Maybe he does. I thought he made it out. But he is escaping with them at one point. I don't remember if he makes it all the way out.
As is Lotta, but I think that both of them wind up staying.
Lotta dies. Yeah, Lotta definitely dies.
She dies. That's right. Yes. Okay. All right. So, first off, this movie is pre-code.
Well, and so a lot of people who talk about this movie are like, why isn't it as well known as Frankenstein and other pre-code movies? And my theory is that, like, Frankenstein, you lift a couple of scenes out of and you're able to re-release in 1935.
Yeah.
You can't cut enough out of this movie to make it code safe and releasable. Yeah. It just disappears.
Also, like, the critical reception when it came out at the time was apparently not great. Now people look at it and say, holy shit, this is maybe one of the best horror films of the era.
H.G. Wells outspokenly hated it. It was banned.
Oh, really? I didn't know he was I didn't even know he was alive when it came out.
Yeah, he lived till the 1940s.
I don't know much about H.G. Wells. I think of him as Jules Verne, but I guess not.
These are both early sci-fi.
I thought they were
writers.
Contemporaries. I guess not. I think that the other issue is that it made people uncomfortable. I think this movie freaked people out the way Freaks did.
Oh, yeah.
A couple of key things. Like, one, I want to talk about the potential here for racism in this movie. There are two angles on that, right? The one is that the way that the characters talk about the interesting natives you have here is racist. It is the language of the time. The characters are racist, probably in a way that they are not aware of. Do with that information what you will. The other way is that the audience could interpret this through a lens of racism, which is what Moreau is up to is elevating animals into humans. And that backfires. That is a bad idea. In the way that if you try to elevate the lower races, that's just going to blow up in your face. And I don't know if that was intentionally in H.G. Wells's writing or in the screenplay or directing of this film, but I guarantee it was in the minds of some of the people who watched it because that's like where we were at the time.
From the race perspective and H.G. Wells's intentions, I don't really have like an answer to that, but I did know that he was very like an anti-vivisectionist, and like people saw this book as like promotional material against animal experimentation. Like he was very outspoken about it.
I just wanted to bring up the racism because I feel like people who are semi-familiar with this film or listening to the description, they might say that movie is racist. And I just wanted to put a nod out there. Like, I don't want to, there's nothing to unpack. I don't know any more about it. I just want to say it might be. But I think it was the audience, and I don't like in the same way that Cyberpunk in the 80s audiences, I don't know that the writers were writing about this. I think that the audience was receiving a message of when you're afraid of the East. I can't think of what that is. When you're afraid of Japan and China taking over the world and becoming a superpower. I don't think that's in the writing. I think that was in the audience in the same way that I don't really think it's in the writing here. I think it's just written in a contemporary language, and it's in the audience that this movie was being perceived as being
and I think as
reinforcing of racist values.
We just talked about in The Fly, like, and with good horror is you should be seeing the problems of the moment.
If you're receiving the racist message in this movie, then what you're receiving is a reinforcement of your racism because elevating them simple folks is what gets you in trouble.
Yeah, I see.
You can't make them like a white man, right? Like,
it's so interesting because now
I just know that that's what audiences at the time might have received. Probably did.
What I see is like a man trying to make himself an island. Yeah, that, but also just like an island of servants. And he does at one point say, like, I tried to do this type of thing and it didn't work out, and so he's got these people that are like they're working the, what is that, it's a wheel.
Oh my god, I forgot about that. He has a treadmill Yeah,
and
to make
they're
electricity.
keeping the power to make electricity.
It's like
for
a
everyone
hamster
else.
wheel. That's
yeah.
what a treadmill is, by the way. It is a mill that you run with your feet, and it was invented for the prisons in London in the 1800s. They would just make prisoners run power by walking on these treadmills. It's a real thing.
I wonder if that was in the book, and I wonder if that was inspired by the existence of those treadmills.
Well, I mean, it was inspired by the existence of those treadmills in real life. I don't know if that's a scene from the book or not. Couple of takeaways, right? He specifically mentions that he's using plastic surgery to elevate these beasts.
Says plastic surgery.
The reason that matters is because it's not science magic. It's not, no, I have evolved a panther into a woman. It is, I have physically cut and edited a panther until it appears to be a woman.
Mm-hmm.
And I've altered its larynx and speech centers so that it can speak. But it's a fucking panther.
The way that Edwin finds out sort of what's going on is that her hands start to revert back to claws.
Yeah, because she's healing.
Oh, healing. Okay. I sort of missed why that was happening. That felt sort of like magic, but healing.
In the same way that if you take out your lip piercing, eventually the hole will close, right?
Yeah, right.
I'll burn the beast out of you completely now. Mm-hmm. Obviously, there is some science magic there because you can't really do that.
Obviously.
But it does strike me as being very implicit that these are not, it's not like he's doing like genetic engineering. It's not like he's physically changing them into
They're not
a more
evolving over time.
Yeah. Although he does describe something as being stripping 650,000 years of evolution out of nature.
He does, yeah.
Do you know what it's like to be God? Oh, the things you could never say and do in this movie, postcode.
Yeah.
Do you know what it's like to be God? Okay. Right there, just comparing yourself to God is not a thing.
Well, and it's very close to the Frankenstein line.
Very close to the Frankenstein thing. 2, just the implication of bestiality.
Yeah.
Just the implication that, like, you might have sex with a dog man in this movie.
Right.
Ling is a dog. Ling is a faithful dog. That is why he's a dog. He's literally a dog who has been, not that anybody has sex with Ling, but the Panther Woman's a panther. Ling is a dog. Rape as a weapon. Right. Holy fucking shit.
Just trying to get them to have sex, even if she wasn't a panther, is like,
yep.
There's no intention for marriage. It's just mating. Yeah.
The thing that to me is so incredible is just Lawton. This movie does not work without Lawton.
I agree.
He is a monster. He is so threatening. The glee in his face when they're reading back the laws, when he's cracking his whip, that devilish little smile and glance. I've got an idea. He is so naughty. He's such a fucking, holy shit. He's so threatening.
There's no fantasy that you could appeal to a better nature. There is no better nature, which is terrifying.
None. Yeah, he's an abyss, and not in a way that like some supernatural creature would be, right? Like he's not a dragon, you know. He's not a monster from the deep.
You can't just kill him. He's a person. Yeah.
He's a serial killer.
Yeah.
He's like a real dyed in the wool. Like, I have terrifying instincts and they are base instincts.
Well,
and I want to rip you to pieces.
He's experimenting on all of these people and then just, okay, next one, to the point where they have like a village. They have created a society for themselves because he is just discard, next.
Yes.
And just torturing them.
I do want to, is it possible that the vivisection is not a term that's in common parlance? I should explain. Vivisection is the dissection of something that is alive while it's alive. That's I don't know if that's registering. It's not a practice anymore.
Yeah.
To the extent that I'm aware of, I don't think we vivisect anything anymore.
Yeah.
So it's sort of an archaic term at this point. Might need clarification. God, I love this movie. I just 70 minutes. This is why I hate movies that are new. 70 minutes. Are you missing anything here?
No, and I can't really find, at least in watching things about this movie, I didn't see a lot of evidence of scenes being taken out and lost. It's not like you hear with Freaks. Freaks was just torn to shreds, and that's all over the trivia about the movie. I don't really see a lot of evidence of that here. It was intended to be 70.
It's actually a little longer. It's 3.5 reels. A reel of 35 millimeter film and a projector is 20 minutes, right? Mm-hmm. And so movies would be referred to as 1 reelers, 2 reelers, or 3 reelers. You know, very long films might be 4 or 5 reels, but the standard feature length would be 3 reels or thereabouts. So about an hour. The idea of the 90-minute feature comes later. I don't know what else you gain, because when you watch these pre-code movies, There's nothing missing. You don't need any more. They're so efficient. I'm telling you, you ever watch like your 1 hour drama TV show and it's over? The bad ones, it ends before you know it when you're watching an hour.
Yeah.
And it's like, you know why? 'Cause nothing fucking happened, right? Like, I was waiting for something to happen this whole time. Nothing happened in this story. What were we doing? Where did that hour go? I used to watch Mad Men, and my wife and I would be like, this has got to be almost over soon, right? And we're like, holy shit, we're halfway through. So much has happened. There's so much happening. That's what this is like. There is so much happening. You don't even feel like it's 70 minutes.
Yeah.
It does not waste your time. I love that. They're so efficient. More isn't better. It's not better when there's nothing left to add. It's better when there's nothing to take away. Meredith, I can't stop talking.
Well,
Please,
and now, the television point is interesting because now they've created television to be binged. So something happens at the end and at the beginning of an episode. Right. And I saw someone say that him and his wife started watching TV from the middle of the episode to the middle of the episode so they wouldn't get stuck needing to watch the next one, because that's what an episode used to be. Where the middle is used to be the beginning, and the middle of the following episode ends that arc and moves on to the next one so that they can leave you on a cliffhanger and suck you into watching the next one.
I buy it. I hate it. I buy it. I remember there was a documentary about the golden age of television and how we now live in the history. It was about the history of like the television show, history of TV a little bit, and also that we now live in a golden age. And Norman Lear was like their big interview in it. Norman Lear, if you don't know, is the creator of some of the most famous TV shows of the 70s, 80s. I mean, the whole time. Kind of cantankerous, I gather. And at the end of the documentary, like, it's basically they're trying to get to this question, and they include it, his answer, but it's like basically as the credits are running, because it sort of throws their thesis out. It was like, so Norman, why do you think we're living in the golden age of television? And he's like, golden age? What, because it's long? Because people don't know how to edit? What the hell are you talking about? Golden age? Stuff has to have endings.
Yeah.
You know? And I thought that was great.
Yeah.
That's kind of how I feel too. Is like, I think that the number of things that are happening in this movie, you don't need more. What else could you possibly need? You watch Gold Diggers of 33. What else could you possibly need in that movie? It's insane. Some of these movies from this time have like multiple arcs. It's not like you're just getting a bare bones, like this happened, then this happened. Like there are like Babyface is a great example where like it feels like 3 movies and it's, I don't know what the runtime is of Babyface, but it's not long.
Well, and this would have been also a B movie. So
probably, yeah.
Yeah. And like, I guess most people probably know where A and B movies come from, but you used to go see a double feature at the movie theater. Yeah. Okay. So, and then the A movie would have been what was shown first with the big stars, the big budget, and then the B movie was shown after, right? And
I thought it went the other way. It doesn't matter.
Oh, the B came first, and then
I think so,
the feature, and then the A followed it up.
It's the big feature. It was the closeout. It was the primetime viewing.
Yeah.
So, and then you would have had shorts in between and newsreels.
Right.
And people would come and go, like you had said.
Yeah,
it was an event. And you'd get plates.
Yeah.
And you'd sit in air conditioning. And there might be a pre-show with beautiful dancing girls. You know, they would come out onto the stage and sing and dance.
So then what I didn't look into, but then I became curious about, is were B movies generally shorter and tighter?
There's no reason that an A movie couldn't be short and tight. But B movies would be but if something is going to be longer, it's the A film.
Yeah.
But it's not going to be that much longer.
Right.
Like feature-length films from the pre-code era, I mean, I don't think they hit much.
Well, everything we've watched
minutes.
from pre-code.
Oh, no, 90 minutes.
Yeah, I think like both Freaks and Frankenstein also fall in like the 70, 80 minute range. So
90 minutes would be long for a pre-code film. I'm sure there's few that go over that. Now, silent films, some of them are fucking stupid long. Joseph von Sternberg was famous for making 8-hour-long movies.
Jeez. Also, something interesting about this movie is that a lot of it is shot on location, which I think would have been, they shot it on Catalina Island, a lot of it. Whereas like if you put it up next to Frankenstein, you can really feel the sets of Frankenstein. Feels like a lot.
Theater.
It feels like theater. And this, for a pre-code movie, for any old movie, honestly, because one thing that this really reminded me of was an episode of Star Trek. I kept thinking that it's set for the fact that an episode of Star Trek feels like, here's our stage, we've dressed it up, and the camera goes like this. And
Here's
this
red rocks.
movie is so much more dynamic than that. But like, as far as being sort of dropped in an environment and dealing with the natives and like finding out what's going on, the mystery here, it felt very much like an episode of Star Trek to me.
It has everything that The Fly doesn't.
Of world building.
It feels like a lived in, no, not that they built the world, like you'd have to like, but rather that it just feels like it lives in a world. It feels like a lived in world as opposed to something that feels like three people in a room.
I also kept thinking of Jurassic Park. I feel like.
Well, so certainly, but Jurassic Park also draws on King Kong, other precodes. So I was going to talk about influences here.
Yeah.
Blade Runner.
Okay.
Blade Runner.
Yeah, explain. You know Blade Runner so much better than I do.
There's a scene lifted from it. The scene where, let's start here, Edwin is confronting Lawton, Moreau, and he's like, oh my God, she thinks she's a person. To do that, to give this woman, to create this creature that wants to be a woman, that has the desires and drives of a woman, but which is not and cannot ever be a woman. What kind of a monster are you? How is it that you would, who would do this, create this creature and not have it know what it is? My God, you monster. That is like almost word for word in Blade Runner when Deckard confronts Tyrell. Oh my God, she doesn't know she's a replicant. What in the fuck is wrong with you, you psycho? And not only that, Tyrell wears these kinds of like, I don't know, I feel like Tyrell's appearance slightly references Moreau's appearance in this. I also think that if you look at the castle that Moreau kind of lives in with these large beige feeling, they look like the blocks that you would build a Mayan temple out of or like an Egyptian pyramid. Look at the office of Tyrell. First off, it is a pyramid. And secondly, when you get in there where the Voight-Kampff test between him and Rachel happens, it is a very kind of temple stonework kind of feeling vibe. I think that this movie was studied. Ridley Scott was definitely looking at this movie with great intention when he made Blade Runner. I think it's direct.
It's inspired by this movie. That's awesome.
I don't know if anybody else has written that and like, duh, Greg, everybody knows that. Every film person ever knows that.
That's what the comments are for. I didn't come across that anywhere. I definitely see it now that you break it down. I totally agree with you. That's a very direct link. And I think
it's
the
super
dialogue
direct.
is there. When I talk about Jurassic Park, that's more of like a vibe of like, you know, you created this island of, even at the end where he sort of leaves the door open for them to survive if they can, feels like they fly away from the island on Jurassic Park, and it's like, well, you can't exterminate everything here, so somehow you're going to deal with it someday.
So there's maybe a square of references to each other here with Jurassic Park, because Jurassic Park is a version of the island of Dr. Moreau without question.
Yes.
And so is it referencing the book or this movie? Michael Crichton, when he wrote the book, certainly had Moreau in mind and may have been aware of the movie, and some of those influences got it in there. Certainly Steven Spielberg is a great student of film. And when he knew, I'm adapting a novel that is clearly inspired and really kind of almost an adaptation of the island of Dr. Moreau, I'm going to reference another film adaptation of Dr. Moreau when I make it. I wouldn't be surprised at all if all of those things interlinked, right?
Yes, absolutely.
It's like the top of an evolutionary tree. Probably thousands of movies could be drawn back to this one if you so desire.
Well, and like I had written down a list of like mad scientists too, which comes up in a million different
of course
horror movies, and definitely are not all a direct tie to this, because Frankenstein also, there's things that predate this both in literature and in the film world that have mad scientists, but it's such a trope in horror especially that I'm sure you could make lots of parallels back to Moreau.
I think that you could even say too that any movie, I don't know what was, I don't have an encyclopedic list of movies that came out before 1932, but 1932 is pretty early in cinema. How about any movie where you're in a remote location with the monster and you can't leave and you have to live with the monster? How about The Shining? Does The Shining connect back to this movie? You know?
Yeah.
It's kind of like I was wondering if the pitchforks and torches scene in Frankenstein was maybe the first pitchfork and torch mob on film.
Yeah,
I don't know.
But this one has that too. You get that in here as well.
Yeah, of course.
Except it's reversed. It's the monsters coming after the villagers.
We were the monsters all along. Perhaps we were the monsters.
Something that really stood out to me in this movie that plays a part in the storytelling in a different way from other movies of this era that I've noticed so far is the sound design, because there is no there's no score on the movie.
Yeah.
Which is interesting, but that whole early part of the movie, you're hearing the dogs barking on the boat. That's like a constant throughout, which is raising the tension a lot, but also sort of foreshadowing to the animals, and like it plays a huge role in the beginning of the movie.
And they keep cutting between Ling slopping for the feeding the dogs slop, and also the dogs, and like so you can visually compare Ling to the dogs. Ling is a dog man, and actually when Ling gets knocked out by you were talking about sound design. There is a moment there too when Ling is knocked out by the captain. Edwin kind of goes to help him, and he notices that this man has a dog's ear. He has a furry dog's ear. So sorry, that took us off the thread.
Well, and then I guess, so I looked a little bit further into that, and the recording engineer, Lauren Ryder, I guess they said recorded a mixture of animal sounds and foreign languages and played them backwards at alternating speeds.
Oh.
And
I mean, it's using I didn't know that. That's so fucking cool. Because you think about these early movies that are kind of early talkies, 1932. Is 3 years. after sound,
that's
really
incredible. And to be playing with it to this degree.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, and I guess it like another thing, like when it was released, like audiences, the sound was really jarring for them. And I mean, of course, with all of these horror movies, there's always accounts of like people vomiting in the movie theater. But it's the first time I've ever heard that attributed to the sound effects, not the imagery.
That's interesting, yeah.
And then another thing that stood out to me with the sound was his cracking of the whip, because Lautner is kind of a sissy with the whip a little bit, but you keep getting the crack of it. Later on,
I buy it.
Well,
I believe the man knows how to use a whip.
So he was. That's actually part of the reason, not part of the reason he was cast, but it was a big perk to casting him was he had done a play with a whip and had some formal training with it. So he knew how to use it already.
That's awesome.
But at the end, he's just sort of flinging it around. But you keep getting the cracking of the whip, which keeps me in the sort of threatening nature of the whip without sound design, which felt pretty lacking at this point in film history. I don't think that would have been nearly as effective.
I can't answer the question on the sound design. I don't know how much how much thought was being put into sound design in other films. I'm sure the answer is some, but I don't know. I think you're probably on the money. I think this is probably a really early use of sound design as an art, as opposed to just, I have to record this movie.
Yeah, we need to come up with sounds. Yeah.
It is, I think, a masterpiece in so many ways. I truly adore this movie. This is my problem with and this was made by Paramount, which is interesting to me, who made kind of like adventure movies, I think is something that they were sort of known for. So it fits into that mode. When I look at the Universal horror movies from this time period, what people think of as the pre-code horror movies, Dracula and I don't know, The Invisible Man and Jekyll and Hyde. I think it's the only horror movie from this time period where I actually say this is effective horror. Even to me today, this is a upsetting film. It is not necessarily terrifying. It's not frightening, but this movie, I think it rattles you a little bit in a way that Dracula and Frankenstein and all those other movies, they really don't. I don't know. What do you think?
The scene in Frankenstein with the father walking through the street with his daughter is, for me, very effective and affected me probably more than any scene in this movie. As overall horror, I would say I was much more ramped up by will they get off the island? How will this resolve? I knew, how Frankenstein's going to resolve. And it's sort of a slow march to the end at some point. This was very exciting through the end. So yeah, I agree there.
Do you feel like it holds up for modern eyes, or do you watch it as a historical interest point?
I think more for me, it's a historical interest point.
Nah.
Yeah, I know. This movie might have been overhyped for me, unfortunately.
Sorry, because I've told you for years how much
you
how
have,
awesome
and everything that I was the reason I was we should finally go and watch it is every horror movie like Freaks and Frankenstein from this period that we've been watching. Whoever's been talking about those movies is you have to watch Island of Lost Souls. I think I liked Freaks more at the end of the day.
Okay,
but not because it's better horror. Because I felt more connected to those characters. Maybe that's the reason.
No, I could buy that. The two things that make this movie three things. The filmmaking is great. The camera moves. The editing is great. The sound design is great. The staging is great. The mise en scene is great. Like everything about it is good, like quality you would compare it to modern filmmaking, and quote modern filmmaking in all those regards. Like it is, these are people, this is people masters of their craft. This is people who know what they're doing. 2, the chilling character and performance of Moreau as done by Lawton. Nobody's done the character better.
So, and hands down, the best villain of the 3 pre-code horror movies we've watched recently.
Oh, yeah.
Like, there is no villain. Really, Frankenstein to me isn't a villain. He's like a very sad, like, creature. Someone put up on, if you had to survive, like they put a question on Threads, like if you had to survive dinner with one of the like famous villain monsters, who would it be? And I was like, well, Frankenstein, because if you just talk to the guy, all he wants to do is have a smoke and a beer with you. Like he's actually a great drinking buddy if you just give him 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Moreau, like, he's unhuman. He's terrifying.
Irredeemable.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, all of those other characters are kind of tragic.
Yeah, and in Freaks, like, I'm rooting for them at the end. Like, you know, they're...
Well, not for the true villains in the film, right?
For the characters that attack the true villains of the film.
Of course.
But it's a revenge story, which doesn't feel scary.
No, but Cleopatra and Samson are definitely irredeemable.
Yeah, the scariest thing is she might succeed in poisoning him, and I would find that sad. It's not scary how this is scary.
It's different kinds of stakes, and also it's a different kind of heightening too. I mean, like, they're just not as effective. They're not Charles Lawton.
Yeah,
Charles Lawton is a great actor. He's just a great actor.
Yeah,
you know, he's fantastic.
And I guess the difference for me in this movie is I'm not really rooting for anyone. I should be rooting for Edwin and Ruth. You
should be rooting for the captain. The poor guy who got hired to go there.
Yeah,
he's the only one who gets killed.
True.
He's like fearless. I'm going back through that goddamn jungle and I'm getting you out of here. This place is dangerous.
Yeah.
These guys can't be trusted. I'm going to go get my crew. I'm just a hired hand. Poor guy.
Yeah.
Got a lot more than he bargained for.
Well, and I'm kind of rooting for Lotta because she's a victim in all of this. But once she's dead, I'm just sort of like, I don't know. Either they're going to die or not die. I don't really care which. I'm not feeling like the anxious sort of like, I hope they're okay feeling that I want out of a horror.
I never really get that.
Yeah.
Anyway,
That's
not like a thing because like it's a movie, you know, like, you know, that you can generally know who's going to make it and who's not. I don't know. That never is part of what makes a horror film work for me. It's interesting though. So it didn't even occur to me that I should feel that it was lacking here. There's just something chilling about the arrangement, about the situation, about the concept of the character, of his machinations, in a way that I find more effective than other way. I don't know. I like it. I also like how tight it is. I like it's 70 minutes and I don't have to waste a whole lot of my life on it.
Yeah. He's also a character that like is incapable of learning from his errors or mistakes. With Dr. Frankenstein, you get the sense that like consequences mean something. For Moreau, the only consequence that could end up meaning something to him is death. You're never going to make him feel shame for the things that he's doing. He's never going to realize the mistake of his hubris. He
winds up strapped down and being tortured.
That's what I mean. And that is the only way to punish a man like that.
And we never hear him die. For all we know, he's still being tortured. Like we have no idea how long that lasts. You know, the movie does not give him mercy. It leaves him there, which I think is important.
Yeah. I do think like H.G. Wells is his work is interesting to talk about as someone who was writing as film was being born, and people credit him as sort of a founding father of science fiction.
Of course. And
his novels like seemed uniquely adaptable to movies.
Yeah. Kind of the Stephen King, or actually I was really thinking of Michael Crichton of his day.
Like The War of the Worlds, Invisible Man, The Time Machine.
I didn't know he was Invisible Man.
Yeah, I didn't know that either until I was going through this list. But like Lost Souls, I didn't know this either, but the 1902 Trip to the Moon is based off of a story of his, which is described as the first sci-fi, which I think you're right. You want to stay away from labeling things the first or definitive because you'll always find another example.
That be the first science fiction? I mean, how is Jules Verne not science fiction? I don't even
understand.
I'm
not writing, not literature, in film.
Oh.
I'm going through my notes to see if I missed anything else that I wanted to talk about. Oh, Oingo Boingo, there's been a bunch of songs and music. Like Blondie has a song inspired by Island of Lost Souls. I think with
Which
the
song?
name. I think the name of the song is Island of Lost Souls. Yeah, Island of Lost Souls.
And Dr. Moreau? I'm sorry, and Oingo Boingo?
Oingo Boingo has a tribute to the film with its song No Spill Blood.
Okay, sure.
Which featured the refrain, "What is the law?"
Awesome.
Yeah.
Of course, House of Pain.
Yes, of course. But seeing Oingo Boingo, I had to mention it after
Love Oingo Boingo.
our walk down Forbidden Zone. Great.
I love
Great
Oingo
movie,
Boingo.
great episode.
Well, I mean, it makes sense too, though, that like Elfman would be up on the pre-code
Yes,
cinema
of course,
track,
of course he
Yeah.
would. Well, and then and then Bela Lugosi. We mentioned that he was the sayer of the law, but
Yeah.
you know he got paid $800 for his part in this movie.
Jesus.
He
took it because he had turned down another part.
Frankenstein.
Right? Okay.
And
because he didn't want to do the makeup.
Right. And then he did the makeup in this movie. And that's why I think people actually there's so many conflicting stories as to why he didn't do Frankenstein. But it's the fact that the character didn't speak. I think that was more of the turn down point for him than the makeup, obviously, because he's in a full face of like scratchy hair makeup in this movie, but he speaks.
I think that the energy of this movie would have been shocking to audiences too. Like when you think about contemporary horror films to it, its contemporaries, they are slow.
Mm-hmm.
Frankenstein moves at a slow pace. The Invisible Man takes, like, actually I can't speak to The Invisible Man. I've never seen that one, but like Jekyll and Hyde and all these movies.
Dracula, my God.
It's so fucking slow. I hate Dracula so much. And I think that what they were trying to do is to leave you in there to linger. And this movie feels like it has rabies. Like it
would have been
moves
exciting,
so fast. And then we're jumping into these like fire torch scenes with like throngs, like 100 screaming nightmares about what is the law. It feels like Mad Max or something. You feel like you're watching The Road Warrior and the Lord Humongous is outside the gates of the refinery or something.
Yeah, it's chaotic, it's confusing, it's exciting. It would be it would have been a thrilling experience.
It grabs you and won't let you go. But I also think that it was probably hampered by the fact that like people probably didn't let their kids go see it.
Right.
I think it was probably, I don't know off the top of my head, I bet it was banned in a lot of places. I bet it was deeply
Britain,
upsetting.
Sweden.
How about states? Yeah, for like, what was it? For violations of the laws of nature in England.
I guess Charles Laughton's wife, Elsa Lancaster.
Oh, I thought he was gay. No, he wasn't.
Well, I mean, a lot of people.
I know.
Marriage
I
of
didn't-
convenience. She's said to have stated, "Of course, it's against nature. So is Mickey Mouse." Which is a funny statement.
Brilliant. Well played.
Yeah, but I'm sure the state censors, either just refused to show it completely, or I can't imagine them really trying to cut this one up. I really think it was either you're showing it in this state or you're not. You're not.
Yeah, it's not. I don't know that there's necessarily any one scene that would be like the one that you would get rid of. It's like the entire concept and tone. Like you'd have to be like, well, this part where and this is where the racism kind of would come into it, right? Like this part where the villain in the movie attempts to trap a white woman and have her raped by a monster man in the jungle is definitely bad. So you'll have to take that whole idea out of the movie,
I think you'd show the first 30 minutes of the movie as a preview and say, if you want to see any more, go to New York and watch it. Go to California and watch it.
Exactly. Yeah. That was not the kind of thing we allow in Iowa.
Yeah. I mean, that's my theory on why it's not well known, is just because they didn't salvage it post code. They just, and I don't actually know when, like with Freaks, there was a moment in the 60s where it got pulled back up and put into festivals and shown. And that's when the popularity of the movie came back in. This one, it seems like people on the down low are always aware of it and always nodding to it, but the general public was not.
And to that end, I wonder if it was a cult film in its own time.
Yeah, it feels. I mean, if Oingo Boingo is and Devo are the people that are picking up on it and mentioning it in their music.
We Not Men? Yeah, Devo for sure.
Yeah, then I think absolutely yes. There's a cult following aspect to this movie.
But like even in its time, you know, even in the 30s, like, oh, did you see Island of Lost Souls? No, they pulled it from theaters. Like, oh, I saw it. It changed me, man.
Mm-hmm.
It was incredible. You know, like even then there might have been people who like a limited coterie who saw it and loved it and like, if only it wasn't so obscure.
Mm-hmm.
If only they would re-release it. If only, because movies would come back out. You know, it was like doing repertory
right.
theater.
Well, and I've seen some interviews with industry people who were like really taken with the costuming, the makeup,
Everything.
and the effects of this movie. So it had respect from most of the industry.
Yes.
I just like in a way that, where they really respected the craft of the movie. So they kept talking about it, kept mimicking it.
If it's a B movie, it's a B movie. And I don't even know that it was, quote, the B movie. Technically, a B movie in the truest sense wasn't just the other film. It was the other film on set. They would use the sets of the A movie in the off hours when the A movie wasn't filming. So like that's when you get into the real technical term, it was like, what's the B movie on this soundstage? What do they shoot in here? Who comes in to film when we clean up for the night?
Well, and this was shot in Catalina Catalina Island. So
yeah, I don't think this was actually a B movie in that sense. But if it were, it's one that somebody poured a ton of love into. Who was the director? Why don't we know that?
Earl C. Kenton. I guess he did his most notable other movies were The Ghost of Frankenstein, House of Frankenstein, and House of Dracula. So he was just doing
crazy
the horror reels. Yeah.
Isn't that crazy? Like, I think that so many people have a moment or two of greatness, but that they get to like kind of mine forever and keep working. And, cause like, you know, obviously, I don't know, maybe those movies are incredible. Maybe maybe The House of So-and-so is like actually amazing if you go watch it. I don't know. I think it'd be worth doing.
I think it's rare to get an opportunity to do something without too many other hands in it.
Yeah.
And so those are probably much higher paying jobs, but they're follow-ups to franchises, and therefore the studio is probably very handsy.
Maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, that would be my.
Then. I think they were probably shot in about 2.5 weeks on the B movie stage, and nobody gave a shit.
That's what I mean, though, and those are the those moments where nobody's watching, nobody gives a shit, where you kind of get away with.
Oh yeah.
Greatness. When everyone's watching, then you've got to stick to paint by numbers.
This has long been my love of low budget garbage movies that were released on Showtime and Cinemax in the 80s and 90s and like HBO films, because it's just like, oh wow, like the stakes were low for the studio, so the people making it kind of had a free hand to do sort of whatever they wanted. There's like a movie from on HBO that I would say it's an obscure film. They did two, and for some reason the first one is the more popular of the movie. One was called Cast a Deadly Spell, and then they did a follow-up called Witch Hunt. Cast a Deadly Spell, I forget it's not Fred McMurray, but it's a guy who's like a Fred McMurray type. Plays H.P. Lovecraft, detective in 1940s Los Angeles, in a Los Angeles where magic is real. Not H.P. Lovecraft, the fiction writer. And then in the sequel, it's the 50s, and the character's played by Edward Hopper. Not Edward Hopper, the painter. Dennis Hopper.
Dennis Hopper. Okay, now I know. Okay.
Dennis Hopper plays H.P. Lovecraft in the sequel, and it takes place in the 50s. And yes, it's not even a thinly veiled look at the HUAC, the House Un-American Activities Committee. It is that. But there's actual witches that they're hunting.
Yeah.
And he's a detective trying to solve a murder plot conspiracy. And it's like, it is not a great movie. It is a dumb movie that had a limited budget probably, but also had Edward Hopper and Eric Bogosian in it. So you get phenomenal performances out of it. And also, what's her name too is in it too. Hold on, now I got to look it up.
Well, now I'm trying to think of like movies that were huge budgets, perfect cast, that like set out to be the best movie of the year, and how many of those achieve that goal compared to movies that didn't have a ton of oversight, that were people just sort of throwing their creative energy in on a shoestring budget to make their passion become real because nobody else wanted to sign off on it. And those are the movies that usually break through in some way.
Or ultimately didn't have the budget to buy the hype to actually break through.
Well, you even look at like
gems.
Psycho.
Yep.
Well, maybe it's not.
It was directed by Hitchcock. It was never
no. But that's not necessarily my point. But it was like he did.
I know what you're saying.
Yeah, he did things with that movie that he didn't need approval for, and those are the things that stand out because other people weren't doing them because they couldn't afford to pay for their own movies.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like what happened to music when it became overproduced. You know, when. Anyway, you can't
money ruins everything.
Kind of. I mean, like, you can't get the Dead Kennedys now.
Yeah.
You can't get Bauhaus now. You can't get like the things that Greg likes. But okay, so just to talk about this movie Witch Hunt, let me ruin it for you, which was a concept I had for the show.
We're gonna get out of this episode after this.
1994 R-rated crime fantasy mystery for HBO, made for HBO, 5.5 out of 10 stars on IMDb. People actually prefer the first movie, Cast a Deadly Spell, which is much more comedic and lighthearted than the follow-up. I actually like the follow-up. It's still funny. Has Paul Schrader as the director, Dennis Hopper, Penelope Ann Miller, Eric Bogosian, Cheryl Lee Ralph, Julian Sands. I mean, like, John S. Epperson, Debbie Mazar. I'm just like going through like a real fucking cast in here working on a movie with no fucking money at all and just eating the scenery and doing crazy shit with this movie. It's funny, while making the circuit of talk shows to promote this film, Dennis Hopper stated it was the strangest movie he had ever been in, which is real funny because Dennis Hopper's been in some strange goddamn movies.
Yeah, I was thinking about that.
I mean, Eric Bogosian, I don't know, man. Like, I can't even, like, Bogosian is great, but like, I can't think, I guess he's in a lot of movies, but he should be in more.
So your point is that you just love this movie.
I think it's a very cool movie with maybe some real stupid schlocky scenes in it and some moments and ideas where it's like, oh, that's kind of cool. You can't, like, that's neat. I like what was going on there. That is fun. Not going to do that with a real budget, where there's people looking over your shoulder. And HBO was at that point, not prestige television. HBO was titties after midnight, boxing, and like, let's figure out what we can do that cable can't.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. How do you get people to pay for more cable? You show them the sexy stuff.
Damn right.
That was HBO. Right. When I was growing up, I was that was what you put on at sleepovers when parents went to bed and, we have HBO.
Oh, yeah,
man. The
naughty
stuff.
Oh, dude. Yeah, USA Television. We would watch. What was it we could watch on USA Television? We'd watch Up All Night. We'd watch Duckman. Do you remember fucking Duckman?
No, I don't.
Duckman was an adult animated series starring Jason Alexander as an anthropomorphic duck who is a detective, whose partner is a pig, and whose life sucks. It was great. I'm just thinking about, like, we have Max, which used to be HBO, but whatever. Now it's just Max. I think that if a streaming, if you're going to make the streaming app of your network, personally, I think you have a responsibility to make everything available.
Bring it back. I agree. I hate that streaming is deleting old shows and things like that.
I want my HBO smut. I want that back. I want my 90s channel surfing back. Somebody talked me into getting this channel, Night Flight Plus. And Night Flight was a show that was on VH1 or USA, I forget actually, which was like music documentaries. But they have with this all this weird shit, all of these like VHS video nasties, Mondo Cinema, all of these like low budget VHS horror movies, all of the fucking the trauma stuff, all just like, what did we watch on there? My wife and I watched Dr. Giggles, which
but is that what's happening though? Is that the plan? Like, is HBO letting them license their stuff because they'll make more money off of that than just having it on their network? Like, they've gotten rid of some big stuff.
No. None of that stuff is on Night Flight Plus. Night Flight Plus is a channel that was made, I don't know where. It's in a garbage bin. You can't get it. Night Flight Plus looks like somebody went to the local video store that was going out of business and took all the VHSs nobody wanted. And I love it. I love it. We watched this stupid early 90s horror movie. It took us 3 nights to get through because we kept falling asleep, called Dr. Giggles. It is insane. If you've ever seen this movie, it is insane and wonderful and actually good. It's really well made. It's just out of its fucking mind.
Well, and now this is buried in the episode, but maybe I'll make it a short extra episode or something. But I guess, like, we had a conversation last week. We took a week down from Midnight Local, and what we've sort of decided is to stop covering the big stuff and to cover the bargain bin, be hard
obscure
to find
stuff.
Obscure shit for a while and see, because that's what we want to talk about. And we end up talking about, like, as much as we love the Ghostbusters, we love the Blade Runners, there's a million different reviews out there, and we end up talking about this stuff, and then we have to spend so much time going through the facts and the trivia everyone knows, because we get called out if we miss something, and that's really not what we want to be talking about on the podcast. We would rather be talking about weird art, weird shit, how it got made, why it got made, what was happening at the time, bad movies, what's good in bad movies.
Yes. Yeah. So let's define obscure. I'm going to say that for modern audiences, for sure, pre-code films are obscure.
I agree. I think even The Fly can fit into that. That would be on the edge. We'd have to have a
borderline underground cinema. Yeah, for sure.
Forgotten.
Early John Waters movies are definitely obscure.
Yes.
Robot Jocks is obscure.
Like Freaks, Forbidden Zone, which we've done.
Forbidden Zone's extremely obscure, sure.
Well, but very findable. I mean.
But also, I would say Dr. Giggles is obscure because it's a dumb horror movie that, like, does anybody remember this movie? Like, does anybody watch it? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yes. Maybe not obscure, but things you might have forgotten about. Like, would you put one that's definitely not obscure? They're making a fucking musical out of it, but like Death Becomes Her, would that fall in this category?
It's like a movie that was a big deal when it came out, so no, because it like won awards and shit, but it's like largely overlooked by modern audiences.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
To
like,
some degree.
It can be obscure, it can be forgotten about, it could be something. Yeah,
we got to get in some Gallo movies. We got to watch some Gallo.
Yeah,
little Italian horror.
Well, if you have, if you're listening to this at an hour and 20 minutes into this episode, if you have anything that you think fits this category that you'd want to watch, I think it'd be fun to watch a couple of things that neither of us have seen.
Oh, for sure. I think we gotta. I think we gotta do that. I would probably, you're talking about modern movies. I would say Sorry for Bothering You or Sorry to Bother You, or Sorry for Bothering You. I forget which. I think it's Sorry to Bother You. I would call that one obscure.
Okay.
I loved that movie. I don't think a ton of people saw it. I think more people should see it. Anyway.
Well, now in now's context, this is so interesting because you've got like the big movies, the big budget movies that come out, which people aren't going to see in the same numbers they used to. And then you've got tons of other stuff coming out direct to streaming. Like there's so much obscure in the sense that like all of these things appeal to much more specific targeted audiences. So I don't know. Is that as interesting as like going to find something from 1995 that was released in theaters and they made a really big go at trying to make it big, but just nobody watched it or cared about it?
I think that's more fun.
Yeah, I agree.
Personally, I think we got to do Showgirls at some point.
Yes, Mom.
I've never seen it.
Mom-in-law, please do not listen to that episode if we do it. That is a no. That is a... not for you.
I've never seen it, so I don't know.
You've never seen it? Wow.
No.
The commentary. There's a commentary as a self-proclaimed Showgirls aficionado on the DVD, and it is. I mean, you got to watch it once without it, but this guy's commentary is one of the best things I've ever heard.
Is it like a riff track almost?
Yes, he is passionate. This man travels the country doing like
that's not riff tracks. Though.
talks about doing like, it's not a director, it's not someone from the movie, it is a self-proclaimed super fan who goes around teaching people about showgirls. And he does the commentary, and it's brilliant. It's wonderful.
That's some weird shit.
That movie just has such a fandom, especially in the gay male community, which is fascinating.
Huh.
Gay men love showgirls.
Huh. Wouldn't know that. Let's wrap it up, man. I got a headache and I'm tired.
All right.
And I still have to make how to drink.
Bye.
We should do a closeout. We should say the things. You can watch. You got to get on. Never mind. Fuck it.
You can find us on YouTube. We have an Instagram. We have a TikTok. The YouTube, you will find clips throughout the show. We'll have a lot of like visual backups where it is necessary and possible.
I'll see you at the movies. I'm working on catchphrases, Meredith. What do you think?
I like that. I'll see you at the movies.
I'll see you at the movies. I think that's somebody else.
I know you've been doing good night and good luck for a long time, but that's...
I stole that from Edward R. Moreau.
Yeah, of course.
Oh, you knew that? Okay, fine.
There's a whole movie called Good Night and Good Luck. It's a biopic.
I know. It's a good movie.
Yeah, that's it.
Bye.